My mother ignored me when her stepson stole from me to impress his girlfriend. I escaped at night, and when the thousands in child support stopped, she stopped contacting me completely. I'm 16 years old. Well, almost 17 now. And I need to tell this story because I basically just moved in with my dad after running away from my mom's house in the middle of the night, and I still can't believe things got to that point. The thing is, my parents got divorced like 7 years ago, when I was 9, and at first everything was relatively normal. I mean, as normal as a divorce can be, you know? I lived mainly with my mom because my dad traveled a lot for work, and we'd see each other on weekends and holidays. But like 4 years ago, my dad got this huge promotion, like one of those life-changing ones, and he had to move to another city that's like 4 hours away. Obviously, I couldn't live with him during the week because it was impossible to go back and forth to school, so I stayed with my mom full-time and saw my dad every 2 weeks or so. At first, my mom and I had a really good relationship. I mean, she'd always been like my best friend, besides being my mom. You know what? I mean, we did everything together, went shopping, watched movies, cooked. It was great. But then, like 3 years ago, she started dating Rick, and that's when things started to gradually change. It wasn't immediate. Honestly, it was more like a slow change that you don't notice until it's already happened. Rick seemed like a good guy at first. I'm not gonna lie. He was nice to me and everything. But he had a son my same age, Oliver. And from day one, I knew that was going to complicate things. After about a year of my mom and Rick dating, he and Oliver moved in with us, and that's when everything really started to go downhill, though I didn't realize it right away. What happened was my mom basically started prioritizing her new family over me. I don't know how to explain it without sounding dramatic, but it was like suddenly I was a guest in my own house instead of her daughter. Rick and Oliver always came first. Always. If I wanted to do something with my mom, she had plans with Rick. If I needed something, I had to wait because Oliver needed her attention. And looking back, I should have seen it coming. But I guess when you're living the situation day by day, you don't realize how bad things are getting until something explodes. Now, here comes the important part that my dad told me afterwards. And that explains a lot of things. Turns out when my dad got that promotion 4 years ago, his salary increased quite a bit. Like a lot. And as part of the custody agreement, he has to pay 20% of his income as child support. I'm not going to give exact numbers because it's kind of awkward, but let's just say it's a considerable amount of money, like enough to live very comfortably. And all that money went straight to my mom every month. I had no idea about this until recently. I thought my dad paid something normal. I didn't know it was that much. And the thing is, well, you'll see why this is relevant. Everything started falling apart like 2 months ago. When I noticed, my stuff started disappearing. At first I thought I was crazy. Like, where did I leave my new headphones? Where's that hoodie I just bought? Stuff like that. But then more expensive things started disappearing. Like my new sneakers that my dad had given me. And they weren't cheap. They were like some Nikes that cost easily $200. A jacket I loved, some accessories, basically anything of value that I had. I asked my mom if she'd seen my stuff, and she told me I'd probably lost them or left them somewhere, as if I was that careless. I asked Oliver, and he got super defensive immediately, like too defensive for someone who supposedly knew nothing. You know what I mean? And then one day, I'm at school, and I see Oliver's girlfriend, who goes to the same school as us, walking down the hallway wearing my sneakers. And when I say my sneakers, I mean my sneakers. The ones I'd been looking for all over the house for 2 weeks. I recognized them immediately because they had a small stain on the side that I made when I wore them for the first time. I just stood there staring at her thinking, is this really happening? But I didn't say anything at that moment, because I needed to be sure before making a scene. What I did was contact Oliver's girlfriend on Instagram that night. I sent her a super casual message like, hey, I love your sneakers. Where did you get them? And she responds all excited saying they were a gift from Oliver, that he's the best boyfriend in the world because he's always giving her nice things. I asked her what other things he'd given her, trying to sound like I was just interested, and she started sending me photos of everything, and I literally recognized every single thing. The sneakers, the jacket, a purse I thought I'd lost, some sunglasses, earrings, everything. This idiot had been stealing my stuff to impress his girlfriend, and she had no idea they were stolen. Obviously, she thought Oliver had money to buy all those things. I was So furious my hands were shaking as I looked at the photos. For weeks I'd thought I was going crazy, that I was losing things all over the place, and turns out my stepbrother had been blatantly stealing from me to look good to his girlfriend. And the part that hurt the most was thinking about how my mom was going to react when I told her. Part of me still had hope that she'd support me, that she'd see what was happening and do something about it. The next day, I got home and waited until everyone was there. My mom, Rick, and Oliver were in the living room, watching TV, like a super normal family scene, as if nothing was wrong. I walked in and said, "We need to talk," and they all looked at me like I was interrupting them. I told them exactly what I'd discovered, that Oliver had been stealing my stuff and giving it to his girlfriend, and that I had proof. Oliver immediately started denying everything, saying I was crazy, that he'd never do that, basically lying straight to my face. And then, Rick, instead of asking for proof or at least investigating, immediately took Oliver's side. He started saying I was making serious accusations, without evidence, even though I had evidence, that I was trying to cause problems, that I'd always been dramatic. And the worst part, the worst, was that my mom just sat there without saying absolutely anything. I looked at her expecting her to say something, to defend me, to at least ask me for the evidence, but nothing. She just sat there with that uncomfortable look, like she wanted to be anywhere else. I yelled at her, "Are you seriously not going to say anything? Are you going to let Rick talk to me like this when you know I'm telling the truth?" And she just said something like, "I don't want to take sides. This is between you two. Between us two." As if Oliver and I were two kids fighting over a toy and not a clear case of theft. I showed her the photos Oliver's girlfriend had sent me. I showed her all the evidence, and she just said that maybe Oliver had bought similar things, that she couldn't be sure they were mine. She was defending Oliver, or rather, she was choosing not to defend me, which is basically the same thing. Rick kept attacking me, saying I was being a spoiled brat, that I was jealous of Oliver's relationship with his girlfriend, all kinds of things that had nothing to do with the fact that his son had stolen my stuff. And Oliver sitting there playing the victim, like with fake tears in his eyes, saying he couldn't believe I was accusing him of something like that. It was surreal, honestly. Like being in an alternate dimension where up is down and black is white. In that moment, something in me broke. It wasn't just about the stolen stuff, it was about everything. It was about all the months my mom had put me second, about all the times she'd chosen Rick and Oliver over me, about the way I'd become a stranger in my own house. I realized that if I stayed there, I was going to keep being treated like a second-class citizen in my own family. So I said, "You know what? I'm going to live with my dad." And Rick practically laughed in my face, saying, "Good luck with that," as if it were an empty threat. That night, I waited until everyone was asleep. It was like 2 a.m, and I couldn't sleep anyway. I was too angry and sad and basically feeling all the emotions at the same time. I started packing my stuff. I mean, everything I had left that Oliver hadn't already stolen. I called 2 of my best friends and explained the situation to them, and they without hesitation said they'd come help me. Like, they're the best. They literally showed up at 3 a.m. with one of their parents' car. We left the house super stealthily, carrying all my boxes and suitcases, and I was terrified someone would wake up. But nobody did. We loaded everything into the car and started the drive to my dad's house, which, like I said, is 4 hours away. It was the longest car ride of my life. Honestly, I was sitting there in the back seat looking out the window and thinking about everything I was leaving behind. It wasn't just the house, it was the life I'd known for 16 years. It was my school, my other friends who didn't come with me, though my 2 best friends did accompany me on the trip and then their parents picked them up at my dad's house. It was my mom, even though she hadn't really been my mom for a long time. We got to my dad's house like at 6 a.m. He was asleep, obviously, because I hadn't told him I was coming. I hadn't wanted to risk him stopping me or calling my mom. I rang the doorbell like 10 times until he opened the door in pajamas with a totally confused face. And when he saw me standing there with all my stuff, his expression changed from confusion to concern immediately. He asked me what had happened, and I basically broke down. I told him everything about the theft, my mom's betrayal, how I felt like a stranger in my own house, and he just hugged me and told me everything was going to be okay, that I could stay as long as I needed. After my friends left with their parents who picked them up, my dad and I sat down to talk seriously. And that's when he told me about the child support. He explained that he'd been paying a huge amount of money every month, 20% of his salary, which was now pretty high, and that technically that money was for me, for my needs, my education, my stuff. He asked me if my mom had ever used that money on me, if we'd gone shopping regularly, if she'd bought me things I needed, basically trying to understand where all that money was going. And when I started thinking about it, I realized no. I mean, my mom bought me things occasionally, but nothing that would justify the amount of money my dad was sending. Rick had upgraded his truck last year. They'd remodeled the kitchen. They'd gone on a trip to Disney. That, curiously, I couldn't go to because I had important exams. Though now I realize they probably just didn't want to take me. Basically, they'd been living well while my dad sent all that money that was supposedly for me. My dad didn't want to assume the worst, but it was obvious something didn't add up. It was in that moment I decided I didn't want to go back. It wasn't just about the incident with Oliver. It was about everything. It was about feeling invisible in my own house, about not being a priority for my mom, about living in an environment where I clearly wasn't wanted, or at least wasn't wanted like I should be. I told my dad I wanted to stay with him permanently, that I wanted to change schools and start over here. He was happy to have me. That was obvious right away, but he was also worried about the legal implications and all that. My dad called a lawyer that same day. He started the process to request primary custody, which meant the child support money would stop because I wouldn't be living with my mom anymore. And let me tell you, the moment my mom found out she was going to lose that money, her attitude changed completely. Suddenly, she started texting me all the time, calling me, saying she missed me so much that things could change, that she'd talked to Oliver and he was willing to apologize, as if that fixed anything after everything, basically trying to convince me to come back. But here's what really confirmed to me, it had all been about the money. The moment the custody papers were finalized and the money officially stopped going to her account, she stopped contacting me. Like, overnight. She went from texting me 3 times a day to nothing. Absolute silence. No more calls asking how I was. No more messages telling me she missed me. Nothing. And that hurt. I'm not gonna lie. It hurt a lot to realize I'd basically been used as a monthly check. But at the same time, it was liberating in a way. You know? Because I didn't have to wonder anymore if she really cared or if I was just being paranoid. Meanwhile, at my old school, something happened that was basically poetic justice. Turns out, after I left, I decided to tell Oliver's girlfriend the truth. I sent her a long message explaining that all those things he'd given her were actually my things that he'd stolen, that I had photos of some of them from before they disappeared, and that basically her generous boyfriend was a thief. She didn't believe me at first, which I understand. But then I sent her all the proof I had, and eventually she had to accept the truth. What she did next was epic, honestly. One day at lunch, in front of everyone in the cafeteria, she confronted Oliver at the top of her lungs. She yelled at him that he was a thief, that he'd lied to her about everything, that he'd stolen things from his stepsister to impress her. Basically, she publicly humiliated him in front of the whole school. My friends who still go there sent me videos and everything. It was brutal. Oliver became the laughingstock of the school, and honestly, part of me, I felt some satisfaction watching that. I know maybe it's bad to feel that way, but after everything that happened, I can't help it. Now, I live with my dad full-time, and I started at a new school like a month ago. I'm not gonna lie. It was hard at first, like having to make new friends and adapt to everything, but it's 100 times better than being at my mom's house. My dad and I get along incredibly. We cook together, watch series, talk about everything. He works from home most of the time, so he's almost always there when I get home from school. I have my own room that he let me decorate however I wanted, and for the first time in a long time, I feel like I matter. You know what I mean? I haven't talked to my mom again since the custody papers were finalized. Sometimes I think about contacting her. But then I remember how she made me feel. How she chose Rick and Oliver over me. How she stopped talking to me the moment the money stopped. And I don't feel like it anymore. My dad says, if I ever want to have a relationship with her again, he'll support me, but that I have no obligation to do so. He says he's proud of me for having the courage to remove myself from a toxic situation, and coming from him, that means a lot. As for Rick and Oliver, I don't know what's become of them, and honestly, I don't care. I know from my friends that Oliver changed girlfriends like 2 weeks after the scandal, because nobody else wanted to date him after he was exposed as a thief. Rick is probably still the same defensive guy he always was. And my mom, well, I guess she's living her life with her new family, spending her own money now instead of mine. Last week, I was organizing my room and found an old photo of my mom and me from when I was like 8 years old. Before the divorce, before Rick, before everything. We were smiling at some park, hugging each other, and it made me think about how much things can change. That person in the photo seemed to be a completely different mom from the person who ignored me when I needed her most. I don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive her, or if I even should. What I do know is I made the right decision leaving, and that I'm much better off here with my dad, in a place where I'm a priority and not an inconvenience.